In last week's Torah message, I talked about what happens when we want a lot of things and how do we control our desires to want things. In this week's message, I want to use the language of the Torah and a Devar Torah from Rashi, a message from Rashi, to teach us what happens when we let our desires get out of control or when things get beyond our ability to handle from a financial perspective. Hi, everybody. This is Ruben Spolter from Kitah.org, and I want to share with you a Kitah-style lesson where we learn inside the text a pasuk from the Torah. But also the message of the pasuk is, how do we deal with, especially in today's day and age, the idea of credit cards and buying things on credit, something that's so easy nowadays, but it can be so pernicious, so dangerous if you let it get out of hand. Let's look at the pasuk. Parshat Mishpatim is about a ton of mishpatim, a ton of laws, rules. Laws, most of them are about between man and man. Interpersonal laws, guarding things, tort, damages, and other things of that nature. And that's why a mishpat, the word mishpat in halachic literature, generally refers to laws that we can understand, we can relate to. So there's basically a laundry list of mishpatim, of these statutes in this week's parsha. Let's look at one of them in Shemot, Perek Kapet, Pasuk Kaf Dalet. Says the Torah, Im kesef talve et ami, if you lend my nation kesef, okay, if you lend a person in my nation money, et ha'ani imach lo tiyeh lo kinosha. Among the poor among you, you shall not be like a creditor. What that means is that when a person enters into a relationship with another person, when he becomes a borrower vis-a-vis his creditor means someone who lends him money, that creditor has the ability to then has an advantage over him, can lord it over him, can pressure him because, oh, you owe me money. I'm going to want my money back early, or I'm going to make you pay me back on time. I don't want to, so there's a relationship of advantage and disadvantage. Says the Torah, the fact that you are blessed with money and you lent it to somebody else does not give you the right to then lord that over that person. Do not be a nosheh, a creditor. Secondly, lo tasimun alav neshech. You should not place upon him neshech. Neshech means interest. But the word neshech is fascinating because, as Rashi is going to point out, the word neshech is from the word, I'm doing Hebrew, noshech. Let's make that a lot bigger. The word noshech means to bite, like the bite of a snake. So Rashi says, I want to take that word neshech, let's highlight it. Neshech is here, noshech is in our pasuk. Says Rashi, what does that mean? Rashi says, what is neshech? Neshech is ribit. Ribit is the classic word for interest. Today in Israel, if you want to buy a house, or you want to buy anything, even anywhere, around the world, you're going to pay interest. So, says the Torah, you cannot, if you are lending money to someone, you are prohibited from lending with interest. And this has significant halachic ramifications. And this is not something to be taken lightly. This is something that the Torah says many times. It appears in a number of places in the Torah, neshech and marbit, that you should not charge interest and interest. And the Torah says it's considered both. He has two languages of interest in order to tell you that both of them are prohibited. So says Rashi, if it's ribit, if it's interest, why is it called neshech from the word bite? Says Rashi, shehu kinshichat nachash. It is like see that word nishicha. It is like the bite of a snake. Shenoshech, see how many times that word comes up? It bites chaburaktana beraglo ve'eno margish. It bites you with a small little wound in your foot. You don't feel it. Upitom mitbatbet v'nofeach ad kod kodo. And then it bubbles up and it swells until your head. Meaning, you a little snake bite, but it's got put the venom in there. And before you know it, it's a tiny little bite. You didn't even feel it. Before you know it, it's a life-threatening injury. Kach ribit eino margish. Same thing is true about ribit, about interest. You don't feel it. Ve'eno nikar, and it's not recognizable. Ad sheharibit ole umchasro mamon arbe. Until the ribit increases, and it can cause you to lose a tremendous amount of money. It's also compounding. It grows and it grows and it grows. Says the Rashi, said that's why, quoting the Tanchuma, quoting the Midrash, says Rashi, the reason why the Torah calls it neshech is because it has the power to bite. It bites you a little bit, but that bite can have tremendously dangerous consequences moving forward. So there are halachic consequences. An individual is not allowed to lend with interest, nor are Jewish companies and Jewish corporations not even allowed to borrow with interest. which means that in Israel, when you take a mortgage, you're paying interest. You have to have a heter iska. You have to find legal ways around it. But let's be honest, in today's day and age, we're surrounded by interest. And the thing where this is so dangerous is the idea of such a readily available credit and credit cards. There are banks and grocery stores and chains that will love to give you credit cards, free credit cards, no fee. Take our credit card out. In Israel, when you buy groceries, the first thing they ask you is, how many tashlumim? How many payments would you like to pay your groceries? And it always makes me, on the one hand, feel bad, because there are people that cannot afford their groceries and have to spread their grocery bills over time. But also it makes you realize how many times are those people paying for their groceries when they end up paying with interest. When a person goes and buys a TV on interest and doesn't realize he's paying 17.5% credit card debt, 17.5% over a year, he could have bought 2 TVs or 3 TVs. If he would only have waited until he had the money and then paid cash for it, paid off his credit card bill. And that's something I try to tell my children, and I try very hard. Thank God I've been able to keep up to. Never to buy something I don't have the money to pay for. And I understand that I'm fortunate that I'm in that situation. But when young people, they leave high school and they're at college and they get free credit cards, and they get themselves into a cycle of debt, that cycle is neshech, it bites. And that's an important, we have to teach young people, if you're watching this and you're a young person, be very, very, very careful. Never take out a credit card unless you really have to. Never take out a credit card and pay on interest on the payments and spread it out on something that you could pay for anyway. You don't realize how many times you'll be paying for something, and that could get you into a situation from which it's very difficult to get out of afterwards. So on the one hand, the Torah teaches us a prohibition of lending, but that warning of Rashi, the language of neshech, of biting, is something that in today's day and age, because interest is so readily available, it should make us aware just how dangerous interest can be for our financial well-being. Make it a great week. Shabbat Shalom.